Never thought I'd end up in a legal battle with my neighbor over property lines, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. My name's Mike, and this is the story of how my entitled neighbor Karen tried to build a garage on my riverfront property without permission, and how I took her to court and won. My wife Sarah and I had saved for years to buy our dream home on the Snake River in Idaho. We finally found the perfect place, a cozy 3-bedroom cabin on 5 acres of pristine riverfront land. The property had been in the previous owner's family for generations, and they were particular about who they sold it to. They wanted someone who would appreciate the natural beauty and tranquility of the area. When we first toured the property, I was instantly in love. The cabin itself was rustic but well maintained, with a huge deck overlooking the river. But it was the land that really sold me, gently sloping down to a private beach on the riverbank, dotted with towering pines and aspens. I could already imagine lazy summer afternoons fishing off the dock and evening bonfires under the stars. The sellers seemed to take a liking to Sarah and me. We shared their love of nature and outdoor recreation. We talked for hours about our plans to preserve the land and maybe add some walking trails. By the end of our second visit, they told us they'd be honored to pass their family legacy on to us. We closed on the property in early spring and spent that first summer fixing up the cabin and exploring our new land. It was everything we'd dreamed of and more. The peace and quiet were incredible after years of living in the city. We'd have our morning coffee on the deck, watching bald eagles soar over the river. In the evenings, we'd take walks down to the beach and watch the sunset reflect off the water. It felt like our own little slice of paradise. Our nearest neighbors were about a quarter-mile down the road, a middle-aged couple named John and Karen Thompson. They seemed friendly enough at first, bringing over a welcome basket when we moved in. But it didn't take long for Karen's true colors to show. It started with little things. She'd drop by unannounced several times a week, usually right around dinner time. She'd invite herself onto our deck and chat for hours, oblivious to our hints that we were trying to eat. She'd borrow tools or kitchen items and return them damaged or not at all. But the real issues started that fall when Karen and John decided to build a detached garage on their property. One Saturday morning, I was out for my usual walk along the river when I noticed a couple of guys with surveying equipment on our land, about 50 feet from the property line. Curious, I wandered over to see what was going on. "Morning, fellas," I called out as I approached. "What brings you out this way?" The older of the two men looked up from the tripod he was adjusting. "Oh, good morning, sir. We're just doing a survey for a new garage build." "Are you the property owner?" I frowned, confused. "I am, yes, but there must be some mistake. We're not building any garage." The surveyor pulled a folded paper from his pocket and studied it. "Let's see here. Job order for Karen Thompson. New 30 by 40 detached garage." He glanced around. "This is 1422 River Road, right?" "No, that's my neighbor's place down the road," I replied. "This is 1430. You're on my property right now." The younger surveyor spoke up, looking concerned. "Oh geez, I'm real sorry about that, sir. The client told us to come out this way past the big pine with the tire swing. Said it was the northeast corner of the build site." I sighed, realizing what was happening. The big pine with the tire swing was a landmark on our property, about 75 feet inside our line. We'd hung the swing for our grandkids last summer. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. "This is definitely our land, not the Thompsons. You might want to double check with your client on the building location." The older man nodded. "We certainly will, sir. Again, we apologize for the mix-up. We'll pack up and be on our way." As they gathered their equipment, I headed back to the house, already dreading the conversation I knew I'd have to have with Karen. Sure enough, I was barely through the door when I saw her marching up our driveway. "Mike," she called out in that shrill voice of hers, "why on earth did you send my surveyors away? We're on a tight schedule here." I stepped out onto the porch to meet her. "Good morning, Karen. There's been a misunderstanding. The surveyors were on our property, not yours. You can't build a garage on our land." Karen's face flushed red. "Don't be ridiculous. That's my property. It always has been." "I'm afraid you're mistaken," I said, trying to keep my tone calm and reasonable. "Our property line is about 75 feet south of where your surveyors were set up. You're welcome to look at our deed if you'd like." "I don't need to see your deed," Karen snapped. "I've lived here for 20 years. I think I know where my own property line is." I took a deep breath. "Karen, I understand this is frustrating, but the property lines are very clear. That land belongs to us. You're welcome to build on your own property, but you can't build on ours." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Listen here, Mike. That garage is going exactly where I want it to go. I don't care what your silly little deed says. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and I've been using that land for years." "That's not how property law works, Karen," I tried to explain. "Using someone else's land doesn't make it yours. Please, let's just take a step back here. I'm happy to walk the property line with you so we can clear this up. But Karen was having none of it. I'm not walking anywhere with you. That garage is going up whether you like it or not. You'll thank me later when it raises your property value. And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed off down the driveway. I stood there for a moment, stunned by her irrationality. Then I went inside to fill Sarah in on what had happened. We agreed to give Karen a day or two to cool off and then try talking to her again. But Karen had other plans. The very next morning, we woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I looked out the window to see an excavator tearing up our land where the surveyors had been. I threw on some clothes and ran outside. "Hey, stop! You can't do this," I yelled as I approached the worksite. The excavator operator cut the engine and climbed down. "Sorry buddy, I'm just doing what the client ordered. You got a problem, take it up with her." He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. I looked where he was pointing to see Karen standing there with a smug smile, arms crossed. "Morning, Mike. Isn't it exciting? We're finally breaking ground." "Karen, this has to stop right now," I said firmly. "You are trespassing and destroying our property. If you don't call this off immediately, I'll have no choice but to call the sheriff." Karen's smile didn't waver. "Go right ahead. I'm sure the sheriff would love to waste his time on your frivolous complaints. This is my land, and I'll do what I want with it." I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's office. I briefly explained the situation to the dispatcher, who said she'd send a deputy out. Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh please, you're being ridiculous, Mike. Why can't you just be a good neighbor and let me improve my property?" "This isn't your property to improve," I replied, "and a good neighbor wouldn't try to steal land that doesn't belong to them." We stood there in tense silence for about 20 minutes until a patrol car pulled up. Deputy Johnson stepped out and approached us. "Morning folks," he said. "I understand we have a property dispute here." I nodded. "Yes, Deputy. My neighbor is trying to build a garage on our land without permission. We've asked her to stop, but she refuses." Karen jumped in. "That's not true. This is my land. I've been using it for years." Deputy Johnson held up a hand. "All right, let's just calm down and sort this out. Do either of you have documentation showing the property lines?" "I have our deed and a survey map in the house," I said. "I'd be happy to get them for you." The deputy nodded. "That would be helpful, thank you." I retrieved the documents and showed them to Deputy Johnson. He studied them carefully, then walked the property line himself, comparing landmarks to the map. After about 15 minutes, he came back to where Karen and I were waiting. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "I'm afraid Mr. Stevens is correct. This land is clearly part of his property according to the legal documentation. You'll need to cease construction immediately." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "This is outrageous. I've been paying taxes on this land for years." "I understand you're upset," Deputy Johnson said calmly, "but the property records are very clear. If you believe there's been some mistake, you'll need to take it up with the county assessor's office. But for now, you cannot continue building here without the property owner's permission." Karen glared at me. "This isn't over, Mike," she snarled before storming off towards her house. The deputy turned to me. "You may want to consider putting up some no trespassing signs, just to be on the safe side. And don't hesitate to call us again if there are any further issues." I thanked him for his help, then went to break the news to the excavator operator. He was understandably annoyed at having his time wasted but packed up his equipment without argument. I hoped that would be the end of it. Karen was clearly in the wrong, and now that law enforcement had been involved, surely she'd back down. I should have known better. The next few weeks were tense. Karen alternated between icy silence when we saw each other and leaving nasty notes in our mailbox. She put up a giant, "For sale" sign right on the property line facing our house. She'd have loud parties that went late into the night, with cars parked all over her lawn. But we ignored her antics and went about our lives. With winter approaching, we were busy winterizing the cabin and stacking firewood. I figured Karen would eventually get bored with her childish behavior and move on. Then one crisp November morning, I went out to get the paper and found a construction crew setting up on our land, in the exact same spot as before. I marched over, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Excuse me, you can't build here. This is private property." The foreman, a burly guy in a neon safety vest, looked me up and down. "You Mike Stevens?" "Yes, that's me. I'm the property owner." He pulled out a sheet of paper. "Well, Mr. Stevens, I've got a copy of a deed right here saying this land belongs to Karen Thompson, along with a signed build permit for a garage. So unless you've got some kind of court order, we're gonna get to work." I was speechless. How on earth had Karen gotten a deed and permit for our land? Something was very wrong here. "There's been a mistake," I said. "I have the real deed to this property. Karen Thompson is my neighbor. She doesn't own this land." The foreman shrugged. Look, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. I've got legal documents saying we can build here. Take it up with the county if you've got a problem. We're just here to do a job. I pulled out my phone to call the sheriff again, but then I heard a familiar voice behind me. Is there a problem here, Mike? Karen asked sweetly as she walked up. I whirled to face her. Karen, what have you done? How did you get a deed to our land? She smiled. Oh, Mike, you're so dramatic. I told you that land was mine. I simply went down to the county office and straightened out their mistake. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. This is illegal, I sputtered. You can't just forge documents and steal someone's land. Forge documents? I would never, Karen gasped in mock offense. Everything's perfectly legal, I assure you. Feel free to call the sheriff again if you don't believe me. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd stop harassing my construction crew and let them do their job. I stood there in shock as Karen sauntered away and the crew got to work. This was insane. How could this be happening? I went inside and immediately called our lawyer, Jack Reeves. I'd known Jack for years. He'd handled the purchase of the property for us. I quickly explained the situation. Slow down, Mike, Jack said when I finished. This doesn't make any sense. There's no way Karen could have legally obtained a deed to your land without your knowledge. Something fishy is definitely going on here. I'm going to call the county recorder's office and see what I can find out. In the meantime, call the sheriff and get them out there to stop construction. I'll call you back as soon as I know something. I hung up and dialed the sheriff's office again. I gave the dispatcher a recap of the situation, emphasizing that Karen had somehow obtained fraudulent documents. She said she'd send a deputy out right away. While I waited, I went back outside to keep an eye on things. The crew had wasted no time getting to work. The excavator was already digging the foundation, and lumber was being unloaded from a truck. About 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. To my relief, it was Deputy Johnson again. He'd be familiar with the previous incident. I walked over to meet him as he got out of the car. Thanks for coming, Deputy. I know this must seem crazy. He nodded. Fill me in on what's happened since last time. I explained about Karen's fraudulent deed and permit. Deputy Johnson frowned as he listened. That's a serious accusation, he said when I finished. Do you have any proof that the documents are fake? Not yet, I admitted, but our lawyer is looking into it now. He said there's no way she could have legally gotten a deed to our land. The deputy nodded. All right, let me take a look at what they have and talk to Ms. Thompson. I waited anxiously while Deputy Johnson examined the paperwork and spoke with Karen and the foreman. After what seemed like an eternity, he came back over to me. Mr. Stevens, I'm afraid there's not much I can do right now, he said. The documents they have appear to be in order. Without evidence that they're fraudulent, I can't stop the construction. My heart sank. But this is our land. She's stealing it right in front of us. Deputy Johnson held up a hand. I understand you're upset, but my hands are tied legally. This is now a civil matter. You'll need to get a court order to stop construction. I'd advise you to contact a lawyer immediately if you haven't already. I nodded dejectedly. I have. He's looking into it now. Good, the deputy said. Document everything. Take photos, keep a log of all interactions, and call us again if there's any kind of confrontation or threat. I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I thanked him and watched him drive away, feeling utterly helpless as the construction continued on our land. Just then, my phone rang. It was Jack. Mike, we've got a big problem, he said without preamble. I talked to the county recorder. They show a quitclaim deed transferring a portion of your land to Karen Thompson, dated about a month ago. It has what appears to be your and Sarah's signatures on it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That's impossible. We never signed anything like that. I know, Jack said grimly, which means we're dealing with forged documents and quite possibly identity theft. I'm going to contact the FBI and the State Attorney General's office. This is way beyond a simple property dispute now. My mind was reeling. What do we do in the meantime? They're literally digging up our land as we speak. I'm filing for an emergency injunction right now to stop construction, Jack replied. But it may take a day or two for a judge to rule on it. In the meantime, document everything. Take videos and photos. But don't confront Karen or the construction crew. We don't want to give them any ammunition to use against us. I agreed and hung up, feeling a mix of relief that we were taking action and anxiety about how long it might take. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house and taking photos every hour to document the construction progress. Sarah got home from work that evening and was just as shocked and upset as I was when I filled her in. We sat up late into the night, going over every interaction we'd had with Karen and trying to figure out how she could have pulled this off. The next morning, I called in sick to work. There was no way I could focus on anything else with this going on. I spent the day on the phone, talking to Jack for updates, calling the county recorder and assessor's offices trying to get more information, researching property laws online. By that afternoon, real progress was being made on the garage. The foundation had been poured and framing was starting to go up. It made me sick to my stomach to watch. Finally, around 4 p.m., I got the call I'd been waiting for from Jack. "We got the injunction," he said. "I'm emailing you a copy now. Construction has to cease immediately pending a hearing next week." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "That's great news. Thank you, Jack." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "This is just the first step. We've got a long legal battle ahead of us, but at least we've stopped the immediate damage." I printed out the injunction and headed outside, where Karen was chatting with the foreman. "Excuse me," I said as I approached. "I have a court order here requiring all construction to stop immediately." The foreman took the paper and read it over with a frown. "Looks legit to me. All right, boys, pack it up," he called out to his crew. Karen's face was a mask of fury. "This is ridiculous. You can't do this." "Actually, we can," I replied calmly. "A judge disagrees with your claim to this land. There will be a hearing next week to sort this out. Until then, you are not to set foot on our property. If you do, you'll be trespassing and I'll have you arrested." "We'll see about that," Karen snarled. "My lawyer will destroy you in court." I just smiled and walked away. For the first time in days, I felt like we had the upper hand. The next week was a flurry of activity as we prepared for the hearing. Jack had been busy building our case. He'd uncovered evidence that Karen had indeed forged the quitclaim deed using publicly available copies of our signatures. She'd also falsified tax records to make it appear she'd been paying taxes on that portion of land for years. "She's looking at some serious criminal charges," Jack told us. "Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. The district attorney is very interested in the case." The day of the hearing arrived. Sarah and I dressed in our best clothes, feeling like we were headed to battle. Jack met us at the courthouse, looking confident. "We've got this," he assured us. "The evidence is overwhelming." We filed into the courtroom and took our seats. Karen was already there with her lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. She shot us a venomous glare as we sat down. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, called the court to order. She began by summarizing the case. "We are here today to determine the rightful ownership of a parcel of land currently in dispute between Michael and Sarah Stevens and Karen Thompson," she said. "Mr. Reeves, as counsel for the plaintiffs, please present your case." Jack stood and laid out our side clearly and concisely. He presented the original deed, survey maps, and tax records showing our ownership of the entire 5-acre parcel. He then detailed the evidence of Karen's forgery and fraud. "Your Honor, Ms. Thompson fabricated a quitclaim deed transferring a portion of my client's land to herself," Jack explained. "She forged their signatures and falsified tax records to support her claim. We have expert testimony confirming the forged signatures, as well as evidence from the county recorder's office showing when and how these false documents were filed." The judge listened intently, asking a few clarifying questions. Then she turned to Karen's lawyer. "Counselor, what do you have to say to these accusations?" Karen's lawyer cleared his throat nervously. I got the impression he was just now realizing what he'd gotten himself into. "Your Honor, my client believed she had a legitimate claim to the land based on years of use," he began. The judge cut him off. "Are you admitting that your client forged documents and filed false records with the county?" The lawyer wilted under her stern gaze. We'd like to plead the fifth at this time, Your Honor." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "I see." She turned to Karen. "Ms. Thompson, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Karen stood, trying to look confident, but I could see her hands shaking. "Your Honor, I've lived next to that land for 20 years. I've always used it as if it were my own. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong by making it official." "By forging your neighbor's signatures and lying to county officials?" the judge asked sharply. "Ms. Thompson, making it official would have involved purchasing the land from your neighbors, not stealing it through fraud." Karen's face crumpled and she sank back into her seat. The judge shuffled some papers on her desk. "I think I've heard enough. This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs, Michael and Sarah Stevens. They are the legal owners of the entire property in question, as supported by all legitimate documentation." I felt Sarah squeeze my hand as relief flooded through me. The judge continued, "Ms. Thompson, your actions are reprehensible. I am ordering you to pay all legal fees incurred by the Stevens, as well as the cost of remediating any damage done to their property by the unauthorized construction." She peered sternly at Karen over her glasses. "Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution on charges of forgery, fraud, and attempted grand theft. Bailiff, please take Ms. Thompson into custody." Karen let out a wail as the bailiff approached to handcuff her. "You can't do this. That land is mine. Mine." As she was led away, the judge turned back to us. "Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, I apologize for what you've been through. You should be able to reclaim full use of your property immediately. Court is adjourned." As we left the courtroom, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted. Jack shook our hands, beaming. "Congratulations. I'd say that went about as well as we could have hoped." Sarah hugged me tightly. "It's really over," she whispered. But there was still work to be done. Over the next few weeks, we had the partially built garage torn down and the land restored as much as possible. True to the judge's order, it was all done at Karen's expense. We later heard through the grapevine that Karen had taken a plea deal on the criminal charges. She got 5 years probation and had to pay a hefty fine, narrowly avoiding jail time. John put their house up for sale not long after. I can't say I was sad to see them go. It's been about a year now since all this happened. Our property is back to its pristine condition, and we've planted some new trees where the construction damage was worst. Sometimes it almost feels like a bad dream. Did our neighbor really try to steal our land and build a garage on it? But then I look at the small boundary markers we put up along the property line, just as a precaution, and I'm reminded that it was all too real. The whole ordeal taught us some valuable lessons. We learned the importance of knowing your property boundaries and keeping all your documentation in order. We learned that even in small towns, you can't always trust your neighbors. But we also learned the value of standing up for yourself and fighting for what's right. Most of all, we learned to appreciate what we have even more. Every time I look out at our beautiful riverfront property, I'm filled with gratitude. Not just for the land itself, but for the fact that it's undeniably 100% ours. As I sit on the deck watching the sunset over the river, I can't help but smile. Karen thought she could take a piece of our paradise. Instead, she lost everything, and we emerged stronger than ever. Sometimes, justice really does prevail. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget